Good morning. Happy Friday. I will remind you that I am a day behind you on everything that's going on. And as of today, Thursday, things remain somewhat fluid. I will be speaking the second half of the two messages that I'm giving about the election, about politics, about how as Christ followers we think about all this. I'll be speaking on that this weekend. So I am focused today on the last part of Hebrews chapter 12. So we've been finishing, we looked at these four admonitions that come out of everything in the first 11 chapters of Hebrews. In light of who Jesus is and in light of what he's done, right, there's this call to do these things. And yesterday we were looking specifically at this idea of not being like Esau. Sin is short-term thinking. Esau gets held up as an example of somebody who sells his birthright, sells a future blessing for a cup of soup. And we're just being encouraged to not be short-term thinkers and to head down a different path. So we move on from there. And we now have the writer revisiting a sort of a terrifying moment. I'm going to read it for you, and it goes out of the Jews' trip to Mount Sinai. After they've left Egypt, Moses has led them out. They were slaves. They cross the Red Sea. They head to Mount Sinai, where where the whole people or the whole nation is going to sort of come into the presence of God. And it's a terrifying moment for them. I'm reading Hebrews chapter 12, verse 18. For you have not come to what could be touched, to a blazing fire, to darkness, gloom, and storm, to the blast of a trumpet, and to the sounds of words. So he's saying, look, your situation now is different. He'll explain that. But he's describing what happened back at the time of the Exodus. You have not come to this horrifying moment where God shows up in the thunder and in darkness. Those who heard it begged that not another word be spoken. They didn't want to hear God's voice again. It terrified them, for they could not bear what was commanded. The appearance was so terrifying that Moses said, I'm trembling with fear. So even Moses was overwhelmed. And by the way, the people, after this first sort of time that God meets with them, the people will say to Moses, we're not doing that again, right? You go on your own. You go visit with God. Come down and tell us what he says. God's goodness is too overwhelming. It's too terrifying. It reminds me, God is God. He's not safe. The great line from the Chronicles of Narnia, spoken over and over, where Lucy finds out that Aslan, the Christ figure, is a lion. And she goes, oh my goodness, I had no idea he was a lion. Is he quite safe? And the beaver, Mr. Beaver, says, safe? Who said anything about him being safe? Of course he's not safe. But he's good, I tell you. He's the king. And so God is God, and he overwhelms us. And so he overwhelmed them. And then the writer goes on to say, you're not having that situation, the Old Testament Exodus situation. Instead, you have come to Mount Zion, okay, not to Mount Sinai. You've come to Mount Zion, where Christ is crucified, to the city of the living God, to myriads of angels, a festival gathering, to the assembly of the firstborn whose names have been written in heaven, to a judge who is God of all, to the spirits of righteous people made perfect, and to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood, which says better things than the blood of Abel. So we're in a different covenant. We come not to Exodus, not to the law. We come to Christ and to grace. And so in light of that, then in the last part of Hebrews chapter 12, he says, in light of this, see to it consequently that you don't reject this offer. And if there was this horrible situation for those who rejected the earthly prophets, and in the Old Testament, God presents himself, or God has three offices that he uses: prophet, priest, and king. The priests are those who represent the people to God. King covers the civil affairs. The prophet are those who spoke to the people for God. So these three offices, Jesus will perfectly fulfill them all. He is the one whose voice is the voice of God. He is our high priest who represents us to God. He is the King of Kings. So all of these are sort of foreshadowings of Christ. But he says, look, if if it was horrifying for those who had human prophets, right? We now have the prophet of prophets, the one, Jesus, who is fully God. We cannot reject the things that he says to us. So this whole book of Hebrews is saying, look, we have Christ. Consequently, listen to Christ, follow Christ. Do not be shaken from who Christ is and the things that he is commanding. So that's the word for today. Again, it's the book of Hebrews. It's all about Jesus. Jesus 24/7. Every day. So we have Jesus, therefore run after Jesus. Hope to see you this weekend.